Welcome, welcome. This is Bob Hutchins with my infamous friends, Brad Ayres and Ken Ott. Welcome to Agency Exposed.
Ooh.
How are you guys doing?
Thank you. Doing well. It's rainy here in Nashville, but in my heart, it's sunny.
Nice.
I figured you should like this. You're a kid from Detroit.
Yeah, this feels like home to me, I guess. It feels natural.
Yeah, and Ken from New York. I'm kind of depressed right now because this is like I'm from Sunshine State. So.
Oh man, yeah, I'm depressed too. I don't like rain.
So guys, let's talk today a little bit about this whole idea of failing fast and blitz scaling and the lean startup and all these things that have been popular topics over the past several years that we've all read the books and we've known the buzzwords. But it seems as though in this age of Elon Musk, which, by the way, he just released his ugly truck last night.
The Cybertruck, sorry.
Which will probably just sell like gangbusters.
It's definitely distinctive.
It's definitely distinctive, bulletproof, everything. Guys like him on one extreme, and then all the way down to maybe startups that we worked with. There's this kind of new business model of failing fast and scaling quick and getting stuff out. It seems like the fastest wins. What does that mean for agencies who try to lead that charge? Who, we've got production schedules and we're working with multiple clients. And have you guys run into that at all? And are you leading that charge with any of your clients? I'd love to talk about that today.
Yeah. Well, I think it's we have clients that are over 100 years old, and they're even struggling to try to blitz scale or to scale quickly, mostly because there's a lot of new technologies that are coming out, and like Tesla, for instance, they really do kind of lead the technology, battery technology, and so by moving fast, and they just get a lot of knowledge and learn from the failing and from the learning. So it's kind of, they become an expert in what they're doing. And we have companies, like I said, that are over 100 years old, and they're trying to do that as well. And sometimes what they have to do is they have to go outside of their organization because they built such a strong legacy culture and infrastructure, but they can't move as fast as they need to. So they're looking at acquiring companies who could scale faster. They're looking at acquiring technologies that can help them jumpstart and just jump to a more of a blue water approach, and willing to take a little bit more risk in that. And so sometimes it's hard as an agency because to follow that lead and follow it quickly because things pivot very quickly. And, we can talk a little bit more about like how as an agency, how you can prepare your infrastructure, your employees, and your processes to move that quickly and to understand that things pivot. And sometimes that's really hard.
Ken, how about you guys? I know you guys deal in e-commerce specifically, and so it seems like you guys do this all the time. Is that true or not?
I think innovation, yes, especially in e-commerce and outside e-commerce, just consumer products, right? We preach innovation to our clients because because that's ultimately something that's never urgent and always important. And so innovation, whether you're a big company or small company, needs to continually happen. So, I believe heavily in that. And I think as an agency, you have to innovate and innovate quickly, and maybe even in the agency world more so than some of your clients, because you're in a world that's typically stagnant. There's not a lot of innovation happening in that world. And so I think, yes, from that standpoint, I think that when it comes to keeping up with or leading companies to scale really fast or to run really hard or innovate really hard at something, I think number one, you have to make sure you have a really great idea and that you believe in it, whether you're as an agency or the client. I feel like you have a lot of this copy, like Me Too culture with a lot of companies, right? And it's good because companies are pushed to follow the lead. Someone's disrupting, and so they feel like they need to obviously figure something out to disrupt. or to follow that disruption as well. So that's a positive pull, but also a lot of times you have companies that feel like they need to do something just because other people are doing things, and that leads to going out of business a lot of times, or just failing, or not being fully committed to the project that you are trying to scale aggressively, whether you're big or small. And so we try and help coach some of those ideas as well, because just because other people are doing it doesn't mean you should be doing it now, but you should be doing it. You know, you just have to figure out when and the right thing. And then once, I know we can get into right now, like, so if you're, I think as an agency, you need to lead some of that charge, right? And I think that's an important.
I guess a lot of it depends on what you do as an agency, right?
100%.
Like if you just do branding and creative, there's certainly a lot of elements of this, and we're using the term blitz scaling. Reid Hoffman has a book that came out recently. He was one of the founders of LinkedIn, and he lays out some of the principles of blitz scaling, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But depending on what type of agency you are, I guess that would influence what your involvement and leadership would be in that process.
Yeah, I mean, you may not be. We were talking about this a little bit earlier before we started recording, right? Like, just like people have personalities, agencies and businesses have personalities, and so knowing what your strength is important. We've talked about your superpower as a company, but are you really good at vision and being a visionary and helping companies rethink, some of what they're doing, or are you really good at coming behind a founder or a company that has a really giant vision, and are you really good at helping them get there, right? And that doesn't necessarily, not one is better than the other, because the way you execute that can be in multiple of ways, but knowing where you fall in that is probably important. And then,
Go ahead.
Yeah, for our agency, I think we have both of those scenarios. There's companies that we lead, and there's companies that we serve. And the companies that we serve, I'm always concerned that we just become a commodity, because we're just serving them, right? And they're serving their needs, and there's maybe 1,000 other agencies they could easily pick to do the same thing. And obviously we have relationships with them, and hopefully those relationships are strong. But if we're not leading, a lot of times I feel like we're just a commodity, and that to me makes me nervous that our agency is just a commodity. But there are clients that we try to lead, and we just because of their leadership, they just decide that they're not bringing us to the table. And sometimes you can't, even if you want to, right? Just because of access. So for us, we pick and choose that kind of battle. Like we just kind of either naturally fall into the leadership role because they look to us, or we ask to have a seat at the table, and they struggle to bring us in. And so I think as an agency, you kind of got to decide, and maybe you can. Even those companies that you're not having to see a table, I think there's still ways that you can still add table value by kind of indirectly giving them suggestions, helping them to, what I say, see the beach, meaning the ocean. Like when you go to the ocean, you're like, oh, okay, I see now. And just helping to kind of lead from a little bit more from behind.
Yeah.
Even in the role when you're, to talk, we probably should talk about not being a commodity as a completely different topic. Yeah. But when you're helping serve them, wouldn't you say also though that the way you avoid becoming a commodity is by you have to be a really great advisor to them, right? And so we've got sort of similar to you guys. Like some of our clients we work with viral entrepreneurs, we call them, in one category, and in the other category we work with global brands, and those are the two, in my opinion, maybe the two sides of that spectrum. Global brands need to be led through innovation a lot of times, and the viral entrepreneurs need to be advised wisely. And so our role shifts very specifically. But when we're sort of advising like someone who's got a strong vision and they're running really hard at it, We want to be helping them get there, but also, a lot of times everyone's going to make mistakes along the way, and so we're trying to help them make fewer of those mistakes by being a trusted advisor, and that's kind of part of serving.
Yeah, and I think you have to really understand your client's business, and you really have to understand where their business is going, and so that you have a strong alignment with the leadership of a client. And so you're seeing eye to eye, and you're literally an extension of their leadership, and you have the same ideals and understand specifically what the ideals are and where they're going, and can participate in that level. And I think that's also a challenge too, because though we, like every agency has expertise and they have industry expertise, sometimes it's not like you're being on the ground level where these companies are providing products or services and they're on the front line, they're seeing it every day. Whereas an agency, you're always a little disconnected.
Yeah, you're kind of going in and out.
You're kind of going in and out. And so, and as an agency, when you bring on a team and you're working with C-level folks who have been in the industry for 20 years or 10 years or whatever amount, sometimes your team doesn't have that longevity of time within that industry, and some of those nuances they just don't know because they just haven't experienced it.
But I would argue counterintuitively that is the value of an agency.
Sometimes, because you can see things from the outside, and that's the challenge too. Is that if your clients value that, they want an outside opinion, they want an outside view, an outside lens. They value that, they're more apt to bring you to the table, right? As long as they know they're smart, as long as you know that they have the same culture as you have. And that's the challenge too, is that it's not just about knowledge, it's about culture. And we're talking about companies that are scaling fast. There's definitely a culture of that in their environment, and that's that starts from the leadership on down, and they've been able to create that culture. And how do you, as an agency, follow that culture when most people are adverse to change? They're averse to make quick decisions. They're adverse to pivoting. And we all have employees too. They're probably there, and we would be the same way. Is that when you're given a task, when you're given an objective, and then 3 months later that changes. That can throw people off, and that can make people go question leadership and the understanding of where this company's going, and because they don't have the full picture a lot of times.
Wouldn't you say when you're sitting at, if you're at a table, and you're even if it's an industry that your agency does not have a lot of experience in, the reason that you're brought on is because you have a deeper specialty than anyone else at that table in some area.
That's correct.
That's
right? Otherwise, you are kind of probably ready to get axed. And so if you don't have that, then you shouldn't be there. You're sort of that imposter. And I don't think that's common, but that maybe does happen. But like if you're there, you have a deeper specialty than everybody else, theoretically, at something.
Right.
And so you should be able to use that to like push that innovation. So you may not know the industry, but you may.
That's right. And I think for me, and this tends to be my background and my leaning, is that I think a good agency in 2019, 2020, depending on when you're listening to this, I think how you get over those humps and how you address those head on is with data. I mean, we live in a day and age where we don't have to say, hey, we put a full page ad in Time magazine and we got a bump in sales. Those days are over. We can say instantaneously, hey, yesterday we tested this, last week we tested this, and here's what the data shows. This is the demographics that's responding to your product. Here's who bought. Here's the page that worked. Here's the feedback that we got on a survey, and you lead with that. And if a decision maker or a owner or a visionary of a company doesn't respect the data, I don't know what else you can really do. I think a good agency has to have that.
That is an interesting, I totally agree. And that implies that you're investing as an agency outside of any client work in acquiring data.
Absolutely.
Whether it's
got to be your first thing.
Yeah, right. And it may not, I'm saying data broadly, but it could be getting experience, outside of client,
Yeah.
The example that I have is like, for us, we're in e-commerce and we own several product companies we run the stores of, and we can mess around and learn and do all kinds of things that then we can bring over. We also have clients that we are able to do that with as well. But if you're not doing those kind of things, if you're only always working in your specialty for somebody else, and you're never doing those other things that allow you to test and fail and find things, then you probably won't. So that's an important point, is that you have to invest and be intentional about that.
And the data is what gives you the speed, in my opinion. You don't have to wait around and say, oh, let's try this and let's put this out there and let's spend X amount of dollars and see what kind of return we get over the next 6 months. Those days, in my opinion, there's no reason you should be doing that or guiding your client in that. Now, the billings might be good for 6 months, or that's a nice little contract, but you've got to do what's best for your client and say, we've got to pivot on this because this is what the data. And I've seen that over and over again with clients.
You really got to be open to agile testing. So
Yes.
to move quickly and test quickly, because, when you make a 1 or 2% change in a user journey, for an e-commerce, for instance, that can mean millions of dollars for your customer. And so, but you got to be able to think out of the box. You got to be able to have your client trust you that you're going to be doing testing, and that is valuable, and it's valuable to spend resources on that and to try to show them either through history of other clients that you've worked with, how that made a big difference in their business, and that trust us on this, again, having the seat at the table, bringing the expertise of that, but also understanding that it's a real agile type of approach where you have to, again, you don't have 6 months to wait to see if a campaign's successful.
Right.
You have to be able to know within 2 weeks that campaign either is successful or not, and then how to actually refine it to even be more successful, and constantly be refining and optimizing everything. And I think that most companies are open to that as long as you can show them the type of data you're going to bring to the table.
Yes. Presentation,
how that's going to inform them, so that it's really rational decision making at that point, and then how it can actually affect their bottom line.
I saw this working in the film industry and other industries. You guys have seen it. Is many times an owner or a CEO or a creator of a business really is so focused and has worked so long on this idea that they become blind to a lot of other realities. So they may come to you as an agency and say, this is what I want. This is the artwork. This is the creative. This is the direction. And if the data shows otherwise, you've got to be willing to stand up to that person and say, I know this is your baby. I know you love this image, or I know you love this color of this product. But let me show you. When we use this image, you made $10. When you move this image, it made $20. And here's the data. And you've got to be willing to push him in the way to say, we've got to pivot this way.
It sounds so basic, but that's actually a lot
Yes,
easier said than done.
Absolutely.
And what's interesting is, I just wrote a little article about this, but we have this kind of culture built into us from like when we were just little. We've all heard the phrase, the customer's always right? And I think in the agency world, that's the worst phrase ever. I mean, it can destroy your business, your client's business. You're brought in to be a specialist, and if you can't lead in your specialty, then I think you've got a big problem. And inherently, the customer's not right. You have to. They're bringing you in to be right.
Right.
So I think that's a good point. So I would love to know. So like the idea of scaling fast and working with clients and in helping them innovate and all that kind of stuff sounds really glamorous and cool. How there are some real practical challenges to doing that in your organization, inside of your agency, or to serving clients that are doing that. And so how do you overcome those things?
Yeah.
Well, name it. What be specific.
So like, I mean, running fast behind. So let's say you're working with someone that's got a strong vision and they're running fast and they're pivoting fast. How do you run as fast as them, which takes a commitment level, and then also how do you mitigate the fact that their inherent running fast may mean you're less stable in your position?
Yeah. Well, man, we have a client. We've shown them a lot of data, and they specifically the CEO didn't seem to value it as much as we valued it, and we thought it was useful. And sometimes it's hard because it's hard to get into your client's head, especially if there's decision makers within your client's organization that are like, the CEO is making decisions that sometimes you don't see eye to eye because it completely goes against sometimes your data. And I think, first of all, you have to get in the head of your clients. You have to really understand what their key objective is. So a lot of times what happens is I feel like we focus on the actual battle, but we're not understanding how to win what your client's idea is, their end goal. When we have one client, and the CEO wrote a book of his life, and it's on Amazon. And and so for me personally, first thing I did is read his book because I wanted to understand his life and what he went through. He took a company public prior to this new company, and understand his mentality. And so for me, it's an idea of, first of all, I have to understand the why my client wouldn't take my advice, because maybe they have a different objective than I have. Maybe my objective is kind of short term and his objective is more long term. It's winning the war. The battle is not as important to him because he has bigger battles that he's facing within his company. And so, or he has different ideas, even if they don't share them 100% with us, there's still an ideology there that is different than ours. So first of all, you have to get into their head. You have to understand why. You have to ask questions. You have to hang out with them and really understand them. And for me personally, it's been a challenge, and it's been a challenge for our team because they're like, well, why? We don't understand this. It seems very, reasonable that they would want to do this based on the data. But I think what it does is it allows you to go, ooh, okay, I'm starting to see a different picture now than I didn't before. And so what I'm realizing is that with this client is that they are blitzscaling and they're doing it at a very fast rate because they are going to be number one, create a number one market share. They're going to be number one in their business, and they're going to do it very fast, and they're going to take everyone by storm. And it's going to be who gets to the finish line faster, who gets there faster. And also there's some other things behind it as well for their long-term vision that I'm now starting to see, but I didn't see it initially. They didn't express it to me, but now I'm putting the pieces together and going, oh, okay, I get these people a little bit more. I get this person more. I know where they're coming from.
Right.
And so for me, it's always like, first take a step back and ask the why. Why would they be kind of unreasonable in this area when the data shows? Like, why wouldn't they? Seems logical. This is the true direction. So, anyways, with that point,
that's a good point.
That takes a lot of commitment.
It helps you to grow.
Yeah, it does.
So that takes a lot of commitment, though, right? Everything you said requires your personal and time and resource and team commitment. And how do you do that really in an intelligent way for your business? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a point where it may not be good for. Sometimes you can't help. Some of your clients, you can't help if they're not receptive to your offerings and what you're saying and your data and what is the right way. Again, it's not just being like what you said. It's not the client is always right, but it's guiding them to the point where they start to see things. And sometimes it's sticking with them, even if to me, I've always felt like if I can stick with them and build the rapport with them, I build trust. If I can build trust, then they're more receptive to what I'm bringing to the table. So sometimes it's sticking with them for a long time, or sometimes it's saying, hey, we're just not going to be able to serve you well. And sometimes you have to let that relationship go. For me, sometimes it's if you do feel that block from your client and they're like, this is great data, but they're not moving forward with it. It's just ability of why. Why are they not moving forward with it and trying to understand that?
I think you brought up a good point there, Brad. I have a quick little story. It's very similar to yours. I had a client who was had a background in commercial real estate development, and and so this individual had good success in real estate development and buying large tracts of land, developing it, getting it rezoned, and then selling it to big companies who would come in. And but this business that this person had hired me to help with was kind of in the e-commerce space and was totally different from that. And so I was leading the team in blitzscaling principles and, testing out products and the data and, being real sensitive to the use of this this investor's money. And this person kept coming to me and it's like, I don't care about that. I don't care about that. Just develop more products and get it out there and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I kept pushing back, like you mentioned, of, well, this is not this. The data doesn't show us this, and we're losing money here, and this is not. Until finally, like you said, it hit me. It's like this person didn't care about the scaling and the short term. It was a long-term goal for him. And so I had to step back and say, oh, this person's success, and this is particularly true with people who have had good success in other areas, they have a tendency to then apply that to new areas, which aren't intuitively the same, but they can be. They can work. Mm-hmm. And so I realized this person didn't care about the short-term wins and the scalability. This person was applying the same principle of, let's develop it, make it look beautiful, make it look big, and then we can then do something with it. And so I think the long-term play with him was, I think it was more of, we have more value in market share so we can sell, and we may not be profitable. I don't care about profitability necessarily. I want it to look just like he would develop a piece of land, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't look like much now, but I'm going to invest it. I'm going to make it pretty. I'm going to rezone it. And then I'm going to sell it to some big box store that'll come in and give me, $100 million for this tract of land. And I bought it for $5 million. And so it's important to understand the background, specifically if your client has had really good success in other areas. There's a good chance they're going to try to apply that to this. And if you can learn that and help to be that person to help them fulfill that dream, whatever it may be, I think then you become a real value to that client.
Yeah. It's funny because one of our clients sees the CEO, his past record is he built a company that is now valued over $20 billion is his market cap, and or market valuation. And, he told me one time, he's like, my business plan is only 3 months out. That's it. And what it told me is that he's going to pivot if he has to. He's going to pivot fast, and he's going to make changes fast. And either you're with him and you're running right beside that pivot, or you're going to get left behind and you're just going to be following him and you're going to be trying to catch up. And so what happens is that when clients feel that you're just catching up, that's when you lose your trust capital. And so you have to be, and that's what I'm really talking about when clients are blitzscaling or moving fast and pivoting. It's not that they don't know their direction. This individual knows exactly what his business is, exactly where he's going, but he's looking at every opportunity within this space. And what he even in his business, the business model that he had 12 months ago isn't the same business model he has today.
Right.
And so again, how does an agency support somebody like him that is running that fast when employees, they sometimes can't even get, and me and myself as a business owner, I can't even get my head around what he's doing next, or what they're doing next. It's moving so fast that what you're trying to prepare for them that might be 6 months down the road is already gone by, and so the objective they had 6 months prior isn't the same. And how do you move that quickly? And I think a lot of times what we believe is that our clients need to make money today.
Right.
Like, we need to make sure that there's a return on investment today, because most let's face it, most clients want that, right? They want to know that I need to make money today. But there are those clients you're going to come across that do not care about making money today. Mm-hmm. They care about growing their market share, and they want to be leaders in their market, and they're going to spend, and, to the point where they are that. And then they will be on top. They'll have technology that no one else has. They'll have all these, they'll have knowledge that no one else has, and they'll be leaders in their market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's back up, because it's easy to talk about the big, huge clients, the Elon Musks, but when you have a client that, just your average everyday agency client, say you're a small to medium-sized agency, and you do want to institute some of this kind of methodology, but you have different personalities and skill sets within your organization. How do you get them your staff to see and to develop that mindset when they might be people who are creatives, or they're perfectionists, or they're whatever that you need inside your agency to function well? And let's face it, we're all different. As a leader, how do you lead your team in that way to adopt that and to be flexible? Because part of the value of an agency is project management and timelines and billing hours and all those things that we have to manage. And now you're saying, no, we've got to move quick and pivot fast. It can feel chaotic in some ways when you have 5 clients that you're trying to lead in that way.
Yeah, and it can kind of, depending on the information that the different people on your team have, it can burn them out, right? Because so in this type of example where companies are moving fast, and again, you as a founder may not even realize what their full vision is, and they're driven by a why ultimately, which is probably the strongest reason to do anything. That may look irrational on the surface, and that inherently will mean that you're quickly starting something, failing fast. They're failing fast, and that means that they're, you're doing work for them and it's getting thrown away, and doing work for them, it's kind of getting thrown away. And if that's not carefully managed, in my experience, that tends to burn people out, right? Because no one. It's funny. I used to think that just because just maybe because of the way I grew up, like it used to be that I'm getting paid for this thing, and so whatever you do with it is kind of your deal. But more so now than ever, I think it has changed. Money is not the most important thing, which is actually a great thing. But when you're talking about, let's say, a designer or a marketer, or whoever, right, with a specialty skill, if they're creating something and then it's almost irrationally brushed aside or not used, or, in their mind better than another thing, it can start to be demotivating, regardless of the fact that they're getting a paycheck all the time, right? Because your human need is not being satisfied, and it's just demotivating. It could be demotivating as a company, right? Like if you don't understand how someone's mind works, and they're pivoting all the time, you feel like we just did all this work for this campaign or whatever, and then all of a sudden now we're not using it, and it starts to become demotivating. And so, well, number one is realizing it. In my opinion, I also sort of look at my role as one of the leaders of a company, and I was told this by a friend of mine, is your kind of role is to be kind of like a thermostat. So you regulate the outside, right? No matter if it's like 30 degrees outside or 100 degrees outside, that thermostat starts to regulate the inside temperature. And so for your team, hopefully you probably you probably have one of them. You may be the most experienced person in business and vision, that kind of thing. And so you should be able to help regulate and help communicate the right things. Now, there will be people that actually burn your team out legitimately and are pivoting for no reason and actually, disrespectful and all that kind of stuff. And that's a different thing. But when it's not intentionally, when it's not done intentionally that way, and when it's done with true intention because they're trying to get somewhere, it can be challenging, but it is your role to like communicate that all and make people understand that.
I think for us, it's two things. I think it's constantly talking about different business practices with your team. Because what happens is I think a lot of team members come with philosophical barriers where they believe this is the way that all businesses run. And so having them take a look at different types of businesses and approaches to it internally before you even have to deal with this with a client allows them to go, okay, there's multiple ways to get a business off the ground. There's multiple ways to scale. And so that they're open to it. And it basically comes from the top down saying you have to be open to doing this. And number two, if something does pivot where, 3 months of your employees' work goes out the door, it's still bringing in that we're here, that our client wins. Not that we win always. We will always win, but that our client wins. And so showing them that our client now has made a jump, a hurdle, and that somehow we were part of that is always beneficial, because then all that work is just for nothing. It's for the bigger picture that's companies being successful. So even if we do pivot, and to me, it's always communicating, hey, this client is, by the way, we've worked with a client, and their first year and a half, they weren't profitable. And I just learned a couple weeks ago, I met with the president of the company, and he said, hey, just to let you know, we just finally got profitable this month. And I'm like, boom. I'm like, yes. And that's what we're waiting for, right? Bringing that back, sharing that with the team. There was a few things that were cut on the editing floor when we were working, and probably a little frustration because of that. But now this company's profitable, and so it may or may not have been because of our involvement with that. But still, it's identifying what are our goals. Our goal is not, is if we're serving a customer, it's to see that customer's objective met and their business objective met, and follow their leadership, at the same time try to bring value to that leadership and have a seat at the table. So
that's good. What do you guys think is the main barrier, or let me say it this way: what do you feel like the value is for agencies moving forward in the near future, in the next 5 years, 10 years? Because I think what we're talking about is everybody's moving at the speed of light. Right, most companies are realizing that you can source, you can scale, you can go live online, you can test, in hours and days and weeks. It's not months and years anymore. What do you feel like is the real value? What's the values that agencies bring and should be bringing, and how is that evolving over the next several years?
I think it's experience in driving results. I think more often than ever. I mean, if you look at the trajectory, I'm not a traditional agency guy, so I'm just looking at it from the outside. But like, if you look at the trajectory, you've got, agencies that were hired and to do everything, and then they were responsible for figuring out how to do this thing and figuring out how to do this thing and for everything from strategy and implementation. Now you've got, I find more and more companies bringing a lot of that in-house, and it's cyclical. I don't know that that's necessarily better or wiser. There's pros and cons to both of those. I think sometimes companies think that there's only pros in bringing it in-house because, maybe they can be more agile, but that a lot of times lacks in discipline and they end up not getting there. But for whatever reason, you start seeing that. I think if your value is purely implementation, and everyone probably agree with this, then your value is going to be challenged. In my opinion, the biggest benefit to having an agency or any outside advisor is experience that you don't have as a company, an experience that is rooted in success. And so you may or may not do some of the implementation, but you're ultimately, in my opinion, the thing that no one else can rip off is your experience. And so if that's valuable to somebody, that is the biggest barrier to entry.
That's good. So you're saying that it's going to be really hard for people to jump in at a level with very little experience.
I think that gaining experience is important. And I do think that there's got to be a strategy to doing that. And that has to probably be job one, trying to get successes And that's sort of like starting a business. You sort of take as much work as you can to pay the bills, and then eventually you start to like figure that out. But I think it's the same with experience. So I don't think you're dead in the water if you don't have experience, but I do think if you're not intentionally gaining it, I think that it's a more challenging road.
Yeah. You know, for me, it's one of the things of value that we have is that we want to make sure that everything that we produce is at a high level. We've retained a lot of clients, I think, because of that high level. But sometimes that high level is done because of a lot of perfectionists within your organization, including myself. I'm bent to be more of a perfectionist, which always slows down the process. So I always struggle with this minimally viable product because the minimally viable product isn't at the level that I think it needs to be, because there is an element that I feel, I guess more as a more creative bent, that people, there's a value to that. There's a value to a high-end product. There's a value to a high-end aesthetic product, the way you market it. So for us, it's always the challenge of looking at how do we get that minimally viable product in there that we know is going to be enough to affect, for instance, a consumer to actually purchase. At the same time, not spend months doing that, more time doing that than we really need, so that we can get the product out there, get the marketing out there, and then from there adjust.
That's good.
So for us, we find that as a strong value, but at the same time, it also impedes against moving fast. And it's just a big struggle that we have. And for me, I'm just even still learning that, you got to just make decisions and move fast, and move quickly. And again, that last 10%, probably most people won't notice it.
Right.
Even though I might, or somebody else, a creative person might. That last 10%, it's, they always say it's good enough. Let's get it out. It's good enough. Let's get it out.
Yeah.
And I need to have that little thing in my head that says it's good enough. Get it out. Just go, don't overthink it. Just get it out there. And then that's really where you learn, because I think at that point, we're really not learning until we actually get usability testing, until we get people using our products and services and our marketing campaigns to see really how it's affecting. And we can do as much research beforehand, but it's not until you really launch a product till you can really see if it fails or not, or if it's a success. And then at that point, then you can tweak it.
And it's interesting that now has become almost an asset, where in years past it was a liability. So if you release something that was a little bit imperfect, there was a limited way that people would communicate that, or had access to communication. So, you had ABC, NBC, CBS, a handful of stations, and if they all said, this product sucks, you're done, right?
Yeah.
Now you can fail, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to interrupt you. I was going to talk about an example of that just happened today.
Okay.
So Elon Musk just came out with this new truck, right? Interesting look of it aesthetically. It's a little polarizing, but they did this test with the glass, because apparently it's pretty strong. It's much stronger than regular trucks. So they dropped this ball in this glass, like a windshield. It didn't crack, and then Elon Musk decided that he was just going to have that guy throw the metal ball at the windshield of the actual car, and it cracked. And, he was kind of making a joke about it, like, hey, we still have some work to do. But if you look at Elon Musk, his presentation of that truck release, trucks cost billions of dollars just to create a platform. He spent billions of dollars on that truck, just creating the platform. And yet you look at like Apple's presentation of their products, it's night and day. Mm-hmm. Like Elon Musk is just shooting from the hip. Half his presentations don't work right. The screens aren't coming up perfectly. He's making jokes about even failures on the stage. But there's something that I learned from that is it's okay to be human. It's okay not to be perfect.
And the asset to that is that he gets a pass. So for instance, everyone knows, they're like, I can't wait for the new Tesla. And we know in the back of our head, it's probably not going to be perfect. Like he's going he's going to be like, oh yeah, the battery only gets 25 hours of charge, and it said it got 27. Yeah, we got work to do. Or this computer has a glitch in it. Everybody knows that. They know that that's just it, but he gets a pass on that to some degree. Apple does not. First. Apple doesn't get a pass.
No,
because see, they've already set themselves up for perfection. So when the new iPhone comes out and there's a glitch, or the MacBook is, people don't like the keyboard. Oh my gosh, Apple's stock is going down. Apple's going to fail. Their products suck. They're not as good as they used to be. They don't get the same pass.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, the lesson in that is to fail fast, but don't be afraid to be transparent.
And what Elon Musk has done is he's created a culture not only with his company but the brand and his loyalists that say, I'm going to be first, but you're going to have to give me you're going to have to forgive me a little bit, because we're not going to hit it. You're not going to hit a home run every time, but I'm going to get you on third base, and then we'll sneak in, right? Mm-hmm. And sneak into home because we'll get it fixed. And I don't know, there's something about that mentality that I think I would love to adopt into our culture more. And I'd like to adopt it into myself a little bit more, because because of my background and stuff, I am more of that perfectionist, and sometimes I overthink things, and I have to move fast, but I also have to make sure that our agency can move as fast as I move too. I think sometimes, people in my company, they are like, "Hey, Brad, you're just, kind of overthinking this. Just get it out."
Yeah.
And
I think there's a balance to all that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like the world goes around, it takes the yin and the yang, and we all, everybody needs that. But it's an interesting shift in our culture that almost, especially a younger generation, it's almost like they're suspect if everything is too perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's almost only, it's also only perfect in your eyes. Like,
correct.
The really disappointing fact in that, which I've realized, in the last few years as well, is that your bar of perfection is different than everybody else's. So it's really almost like this OCD self-serving thing, when you have to get it to a certain arbitrary bar in your mind to feel like it's perfect, when, like, is that the bar that everybody else measures it by? Like, probably not. Elon released a product yesterday, and so we figured we would. And so we have a few different products. We released this product, which is basically a guide to how you build, it's how we build very successful e-commerce email programs, and they generate millions and millions of revenue. It's very successful frameworks, and we are making a course about it, and we've actually released, before the course, we released a sort of guide. Here's how you do it, and it's like a framework. And we released it yesterday, and we kind of ummed and awed about like how we do the email and that kind of thing, and because we have it at a really low price, kind of irresistible offer thing, because we want feedback and it's just new and everything. Released yesterday, no one bought the product on this irresistible offer yesterday. And even after we thought, oh, this is perfect, and we know it works, we use it all the time, but like, it's not about whether it works or not, but we sort of ummed and awed about how we get this thing out, and we definitely didn't make it perfect. We had we have the philosophy of shipping it versus perfecting it, but still, when it comes down to like certain areas of it, we still kind of like tried to get it perfect. And at the end of the day, what we need to do is get it out, see what people react to it, and hey, even when we get it to a place where we're like, hey man, this is a perfect offer, who would not take this? Apparently not many people did, so it's still different in your mind. And, in this particular case for us, like, we've done this many times and we're committed to it. So we'll figure it out and we'll optimize it and we'll do it. But like, the point is, like, you need to have those cycles, and those cycles really close together, are as close as humanly possible, because if we could have waited another year and then we could have released it and no one would have bought it, and then that would have been a whole year wasted. And so now you have that cycle, that feedback cycle, a little bit closer together. And in some ways, that's probably what, Tesla does well. And in some ways, that's, I don't know if Apple does that, but like, you see that done really, really well. And there's definitely a bar that it needs to work, right? It needs to work. It needs to be a great product. People need to be able to trust it. But then at the end of the day, like, they spent how many billions of dollars developing that truck. There are way more important areas of that truck than the glass, right?
Yes.
So if there's one area that they can skimp on, it's that, that heavy metal ball hitting the glass, cracking it is not. I'd rather the wheels not fall off,
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that glass fiasco.
But people see it. Yeah.
If you look at all the news, it's about how that glass didn't function on stage. It's about the faux pas on stage.
Sure.
And but they got tons of press on that.
Sure.
And again, the loyalists go, "Who cares? They're going to get that fixed."
Yeah, I don't care about the glass.
Because look at the other vehicles they make.
Right.
I mean,
What the point you're missing in all this is what he was doing is showing that our glass is almost bulletproof. And so the fact that a ball thrown out a window surprised people that it cracked it, it's kind of like, well, you could throw a small metal ball at an average car window and it would shatter it.
Yeah.
He was taking a big heavy ball and seeing if it had broke through the glass, and it cracked it. And everybody was like, oh, there you go. It's products. In other words, his glass is 10 times stronger than yours, but they finally cracked it, and that's bad.
Yeah.
It's interesting how things are spun that way.
Absolutely. And that's funny.
It's all about perspective.
But I think we can end on this or start to wind it up. And we were talking about this earlier, going back to Elon Musk and Tesla, is that he's come out of nowhere in the past. I don't know, when was the first Tesla released?
Well, it was with their little sports car.
8 years, 7 years?
Yeah, probably 8-9 years ago, right?
Yeah.
At least.
Meanwhile, you've got these big car companies who, for instance, Nissan, they've had the Leaf for how many years?
I don't know.
Like, it still sucks.
15.
Yeah, like 10 years, 15 years?
15 years,
15 years, they've had a fully electric car.
I don't think they iterated it too much as far as
And they've done
I
nothing
could
with
tell.
it, and nobody likes it, and nobody bought it. I mean, yeah, they sold a bunch of them, but meanwhile, you've got a guy come out of nowhere, totally revolutionized the electric car industry, sold, hundreds of thousands of cars, and now is doing trucks and going to Mars.
And their company's worth more than General Motors.
Yeah. So it's an interesting model, and I think people listening, I think we have to pull it back because it's easy to look at those examples and say, yeah, but he's got $1 billion to spend. He can afford to fail. I can't. What would you say in kind of closing up to that person who has a good idea, who may be representing a client? They're a small agency. They're representing a client who has, $1 million, $500,000, whatever, to spend on launching this good idea. How do you institute this mindset into? How do you scale it back to a small idea like that? And how do you manage that?
I mean, I do think just to that point, like you've got, we see it all the time. Like you've got these, it's sort of almost in vogue to look at Tesla and Apple and be like, and the idea of being an entrepreneur and all that kind of stuff, and be like, hey, we have to, be as aggressive,
right?
And Elon, and if you read his biography and if you just know anything about him, he's like been basically broke after being like a multimillionaire, billionaire, still. So like he did. Why would he do that? Most people would make, several $1 million in the money that he made, and then just be like, I'm not going to risk all that for this thing, but his why, that thing that we keep talking about, is just so much greater than any of the obstacles. So that's the most important thing. That's the thing that drives him. And I think that is the takeaway, in my opinion, is don't blitz scale or innovate or, feel like you have to be a high risk taker just for the sake of doing it because these other companies do it. What you really need to figure out is, as an agency or for your clients, like what is the why behind where they need to go and or where you need to go, and really why is that important? Why is it an absolute necessity? And once you figure out what it is and why it's so important, what that necessity is, then you should run hard at that relative to the strength of that why, right? Mm-hmm. So like, if that why is smaller, then you might be like, I'll risk $1,000 on this. And if that why is giant, like Elon's is, then you risk it all on that. And I think that being the sort of compass to how you walk people through that and how you walk through that as an agency. And I do think agencies need to do this. I think agencies need to innovate and figure out their why, because that keeps them from being a commodity. I think that's an important thing. But I think that's the takeaway, is like you need to have that as a compass, and then or you need to coach yourself or them on figuring it out, because if they don't have that figured out, they will just blow through a bunch of money and fail. They will not be committed to, even if it's a great idea, there's going to be hard times through that idea. And so are they going to bail at the first barrier that comes up, or are they going to commit to actually seeing it through? I think that's all relative to the why.
I agree with you there. I think it's, each individual company has just a completely different personality. And so sometimes you've got to help those folks understand that you could scale faster, and sometimes you're trying to keep up with a company who is scaling fast. Sometimes it's educating your client on lifetime values of your customer, so that, again, we're not here just to win. We're not here to make $1 today, but we're actually looking at the future of your lifetime value and going, okay, we'll spend money right now to acquire a customer because we know that the lifetime value is X, and you're going to make that up in a year from now. Right. That customer is actually going to bring you profit. And so it's really just educating your client in that way, understanding their own philosophies, trying to understand their philosophies, and then how you can fit into their model. And, it's always looking at their overall objectives. Sometimes, leading a business, we start stepping into to where we're making business decisions for our customer. But we also have to understand that these customers are going through, sometimes they have strong boards, sometimes they're public companies that you're limited. And so you're a lot of times following a longer term plan. And there's more restrictions within a company of what you can and can't do, or how it appears on the outside. Again, if it's a public company versus if the CEO and the president has a board that is going to make decisions. So you just have to take all of that into account, and seeing it with a big lens and seeing all of that landscape, I think, is really helpful to really understand how to lead your customer and how to direct them. And also at the same time, like you said, don't be afraid to step in and say, I think we could do this. I think this could do better. And again, it's not the customer is always right, but the customer needs to know that you have their back and that you're running with them and you're right beside them. Otherwise, you don't have a seat at their table. And if you can't get a seat at their table, it's really hard to convince your clients to do anything.
That's good.
So,
thanks, guys, for this time this morning.
That's fun.
I hope that you guys have a great day and go and kill it for your customers.
Thank you.
And your clients. Talk to you guys soon.
Okay.
See you.